morning again. Before I had the Rotary position of bringing in distinguished people to speak with us, I visited with Martin Fletcher about the possibility of having him speak and thought to myself, this would be a great get, as we say in recruitment circles. I asked whether he might be interested
Recording in progress
by saying yes. Be prepared to be wowed by his presentation. His background: he's won almost every television news award, including 5 Emmys, the Television Pulitzer Prize, the Overseas Press Club Awards, and more. Anderson Cooper called him, for decades, the gold standard of television war correspondence. Martin has written 7 books. His second book won the National Jewish Book Award for nonfiction. He's the only author in that category to have been honored in both fiction and nonfiction. He currently is writing books and teaching writing and storytelling for television news. He was a long-time NBC News Middle East bureau chief and correspondent. His parents were refugee Holocaust survivors, so he is intimately insightful about the changing face of Israel and Jews in the world today. As a television reporter, Martin has interviewed anti-Semitic terrorists. So he has a personal take on what it is to be a Jew today in a world with growing anti-Semitism, aggravated by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His presentation, Anti-Semitism and Me, will not be political, not embracing one side or another, but explaining background and context. He left another engagement this morning after he lost electricity at his house and continued that particular meeting and left that particular meeting and has come to join us today. He has written a nice, mercifully brief presentation so that he can take as many questions as possible. That said, we have an overflow crowd today. We thank you for being with us. I have a couple of questions that I will ask that came in early. I will then proceed to the Zoom questions because they can't be with us today. In the meantime, I will pass out paper and pen. You are each invited to write down your questions. I will collect them. If we do not have time, since Martin has to get back to his other engagement, then I will share them with him, and I'm sure that he will honor you with his answers in due time. Please help me welcome Martin Fletcher.
Thanks, Robin. The first speaker today mentioned that journalists have more questions than answers. So Tom Brokaw said to me once that he said, we ask the questions, the problems come with the answers. So I think that pretty much sums up what my role is. I'm going to be speaking about being a Jew in today's world, stemming out of the problem, which has changed dramatically in a very short time because of what's happening in Gaza, obviously. So it's uncomfortable today to be a Jew. By the way, it's much worse to be a Palestinian in Gaza. And as my wife pointed out, Hagar, sitting over here, Mexicans in America don't have such a great time either. So it's not like we Jews have a monopoly on being miserable. But as Shimon Peres, the former Israeli prime minister, said, he said, where is it? For a Jew to be truly happy, he has to be miserable. And that's really there is some truth in that, you know. The Jewish humor is self-deprecating, almost painful. It's a way of coping with a hostile world. And Jews have been in a hostile world for thousands of years. The problems we're facing, the Palestinians face, that Mexicans face, we've been facing that for thousands of years. Jews have been expelled from every country in Europe over the centuries, you know. But we deal with that partly by Jewish humor and partly by just standing up. You know, a Jewish woman, so here's a Jewish woman goes to her rabbi and asks, Yankele and Yosela are both in love with me. Who will be the lucky one? The wise old rabbi answers, Yankele will marry you. Yosela will be the lucky one. So it's painful, but there's always an element of truth in the way we approach the world. On German TV, an interviewer asked Robin Williams, he says, why aren't there funny comedians in Germany? And Robin Williams asked, you killed all the funny ones. So there's nothing new about the position Jews find themselves in today. And I think that's a critical thing to understand for Jews and for everybody else. We've always been a scapegoat. I would say personally that today Israel's earned the reputation of being what they are today because of what's happening in Gaza. It's an extremely difficult situation. It can't be presented well. The Israelis, people are always asking me as a former NBC News bureau chief, and I've been covering Israel and the Middle East now for 50 years, crazily enough. So they say, why don't we do a better, why doesn't Israel do a better job explaining what's going on? And I always answer, look, as a journalist, to tell a good story, you got to have a good story. Right now, it's a terrible story what's happening in Gaza. The story that Israel would like the world to tell, to hear rather, is a story that I'm going to show you, one TV report that I did, which I think sums up, this is the way people did see Israel and have seen Israel since 1945. But it's changing. This is the story Israel wants to tell. So Diego, can we run that video, please?
What a journey. From the Holocaust to this workshop in Tel Aviv to Auschwitz. This violin is unique and not because of the music.
That's not important. The story. That's an unbelievable story.
It's 1944. A 12-year-old boy called Motala, the sole survivor of a Nazi massacre, is hiding in a forest in the Ukraine. When resistance fighters find him, Motala is asleep and hugging this violin, and he wants revenge. When Amnon Weinstein got the violin, it was damaged and unplayable, but he reconstructed it and its story too. He found out that the boy began to play the violin for Nazi officers in their club.
You see here, there is like a fingerprint.
That's the boy's fingerprint?
No, never ever. He was playing for drunk people. And the Germans are drinking schnapps, and this is alcohol. And I do believe that maybe in one evening or something like that, one of the officers who was completely drunk grabs the violin, give me, I will play also.
Each time he played for them, Motala smuggled explosives into their club. Then one day,
he put the fuse inside, he lighted it out, ran away, and it was a big explosion.
200 Germans killed and wounded.
So that's, how to say, a revenge with a violin. A nice one.
Later the Germans killed Motala, but Amnon has his own kind of revenge. The violin plays on. In Jerusalem, and even in the death camp in Auschwitz. One of the world's great violinists, Shlomo Minsk, plays Motala's violin. Amnon was there.
Everybody was crying.
How was it for you in Auschwitz when he played?
Horrible. This was really a moment that I will never forget all my life, and for 2 months I could not sleep after.
Amnon thought of Motala and of his own family killed in the Holocaust, and he said, the Nazis are gone, but we're still here. For today, Martin Fletcher, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
Thank you. The story Israel wants to tell. And that's the story that Israel told. And that's the Israel that people supported and loved. I believe most people. And then it changed. The story's changing. And the story changed because it's been changing for decades, actually. But the last pariah status that Israel is now in, that is affecting Jews all over the world, is, of course, what happened on October 7, and then Israel's reaction to it. So you can be for or against. I'm not going to get into politics of what's right or wrong, who caused it, why. This is a whole different conversation. The issue that I would like to go into is, Is it okay to criticize Israel today? Of course it is. In the last weekend, there were 500,000 Israelis criticizing Israel on the streets, and they've been protesting against the war for months, if not more than a year. So, of course, it's okay to criticize what Israel's doing. The real question is, with all that explosion of anti-Israel feeling around the world, which they define as anti-Zionism, which now also bleeds over, it's not the same thing, but it bleeds over into anti-Semitism. Is that legitimate? If you're against Israel, is it legitimate to attack a synagogue in Australia? To beat up a Jewish man in Brooklyn who's walking down the street with his children? There are all kinds of attacks all around the world against Jews. Is it legitimate? I leave it up to the people. I don't think it's legitimate. I think, but maybe some people do believe it's legitimate. But what it is, it's not anti-Zionism. Attacking Jews because they're Jewish is anti-Semitism. See, pure and simple. So that's not okay, and it's difficult to see that. But again, it's not new. There's always been a reason to attack Jews for 2,000 years. It was only in 1965 that the Pope accepted that Jews were not guilty of the death of Jesus. Only in 1965. Jews, we don't, it's a very recent thing. We have to understand. The Jews were even accepted into clubs and tennis clubs and all kinds of quotas at universities until 1970, 1975 in America, in Canada, in Britain, all over the world. It's very recent that Jews have been accepted and we feel safe. It's a very recent phenomenon. So when I was kindly invited to speak to you guys by Robin, I thought, oh, I know what, I'll hit those guys with the history of the Rotary Club and the Jews. And I wonder when they were allowed into the Rotary Club. Well, I was rather disappointed to find that Jews have been welcomed by the Rotary Club since the very beginning. So I thought, oh, that blows a really good line. Damn, So anyway, so thank you guys for that. That's very encouraging. As I said, nothing new about this. Very difficult, but hard to accept that suddenly Jews have to take off their yarmulkes, hide their Jewish Stars of David. It's like imagine being a Christian and walking around and not daring to wear a cross. I mean, that's what it's like. And it was like that for Jews for centuries. Suddenly, again, that's the way it is today. I'm not saying that it's going to become like in Germany in Nazism, but who knows where it's going to go. My own family, none of my family, and I've read the correspondence, believed that they needed to leave Austria. This will blow over, they all said. And as a matter of interest, my family and my wife's family, Hagar, have lived the entire Jewish experience of the 20th century. So I'll just very briefly go through that to show you in terms of how we react to what we're seeing increasingly is genuine anti-Semitism today on the streets of London, Brussels, Paris, Berlin, Melbourne, Montreal, all over the world. It's incredible what's happening with the Jews because of Israel. We support Israel 100%. We don't support what the Israeli government is doing by 100%. We know when we're in Israel, we're out in the streets demonstrating as well. But it's our country, or my wife's country. So my family, for instance, basically I grew up in London with my brother and my mother and my father because all of my grandparents on both sides, aunts, uncles, cousins, aunts, everybody was murdered in the Holocaust. Everybody. So I grew up in a family of literally 4 people. So when we had a birthday party or an event, there was no one to invite. And then before that, my family came from, they were in Austria. Before that, they were in Bohemia and Moravia. Before that, they were in the Carpathian Mountains. Before that, they were anyway, every generation of Jews for hundreds of years moved one step westwards, escaping pogroms and violence. My wife's family, her parents on her Ukrainian side escaped pogroms in Ukraine, went to live in Israel. On her mother's side, they escaped from Yemen and came to live in Israel. And everybody was always chased away. So as I say, there's nothing new about what's happening, painful as it is. And in fact, our relationship with the Jewish story is even worse in a way, more recent, because on October 7, excuse me, October 7, the day that Hamas came into Israel and murdered 1,200 people and took all those hostages, 3 of Hagar's family were killed on that day. 8 were taken hostage. So we have lived this. The hostages are all out now from our family, thank goodness. But you can't bring the 3 murdered people back. So we've lived it. So it's not academic, when we say that it's worrying, and that there's this growing sense among Jews today, and I share it with my own children, that if things do get worse, where do we go? What do we do? And part of the heritage that I have as the son of Jewish refugees and Holocaust survivors is I always had this thing about, as I'm traveling the world, friend, we see living in all of different countries and reporting on the world, I always had this feeling, if things go to shit, excuse me, I'm always going to have somewhere to go. So I always, I was lucky enough to be able to buy a small apartment in London and a house in London. I always figured, if things really go bad, I'll live in the apartment, live off the rent from the house, we'll be all right. So imagine having that in the background as a sort of guiding motif of your life. But it's just it comes with the territory. And scientists have now proven that that trauma is passed on through genes. This is we now know this to be true. I hope my kids don't have experienced what I'm feeling, but I've always felt that my job as a journalist has been to go to these places and can you put back that, Diego, put back this still photograph, please, and talk to people and find their stories and basically represent one group of people to the other group of people. I always wanted to tell people here what was happening to people there. And my sort of guiding motif of my journalistic life career was always what I read somewhere many decades ago. Somebody wrote, I can't stop this world from being a place that tortures children, but I can stop some children from being tortured. And that's what I figured. And that's a very Jewish thing too. You save a life, you save the world. You do what you can. And by the way, the few speakers from before who helped working with blind people, who are working with education, everyone's doing their little bit to make the world a better place. That's the way to make the world a better place. There is no other way than by doing something yourself, instead of sitting back and complaining and sending horrific email messages on social media to Martin Fletcher every time he speaks up for Israel. You should see the stuff I've been getting. It's unbelievable. So do we have somewhere to go? Well, the answer, very briefly, in terms of history, is no, we don't. By the way, nor do the Palestinians. I'm really, before I get into this, I just want to mention one thing. 1938, the summer of 1938, the world, Europe especially, was into the question, what do we do with the Jews in Germany? And a couple of months later in Austria. Where can they go? Who can we help them? There was a conference, some of you may know, in the French town of Evian, where the drink comes from. The conference was about how do we help the Jews, and one of the questions was which countries will take the Jews in, or some Jews. 32 countries were at that conference in 1938 when everybody knew what Hitler was going to do to the Jews. 32 countries. One country said, well, we'll take some Jews. Everybody else had a reason not to. That country was the Dominican Republic. And a bit later on, another country said, oh yeah, we'll take some too. Costa Rica. France, England, Germany, America, Canada, or forget about it. All had a reason not to take them. So today, you've got to be ready to defend yourself. And again, no one wants to take the Palestinians, by the way. No one stepped up to say, we'll take some from Gaza. They don't want to go. But still, no one has stepped up either to say we'll take them. Okay, me in terms of trying to speak to as a journalist, trying to understand. So this is me speaking to the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades in Nablus during the Second Intifada. And I spent a lot of time in Gaza as well talking to Hamas. My job is to speak to these people, understand what they're saying, and tell the other side, explain what they're saying. And I've done that walking with Mujahideen in Afghanistan, I've been all over the place talking to especially Islamic jihadists because that's the most relevant to my world. Did I do any good? I don't think so. When I was in Afghanistan walking with the Mujahideen for 3 weeks from Pakistan over the Hindu Kush mountains into Afghanistan, they spent every night at the campfire trying to convert me to Islam. Every night. But they didn't mind that I was Jewish. They, that was fine, but I didn't convert, even though it's very easy to convert to Islam. Okay, I'm just going to finish because I want to leave some time for questions by answering one simple question. People always ask, why do people hate the Jews over all these years? Centuries. And my first answer is, why are you asking me? Ask them. I don't know. Ask them why they hate me. But a deeper question, a better answer, I think, and this has been analyzed by everybody for decades, for centuries. Why? What is the position of the Bible? This, that. I think there's a really simple answer why people hate the Jews. It's because it's easy. We've always been a tiny minority. Think about this. Judaism is 4,000 years old. Christianity is 2,000. Islam is 1,300 years old. Yet there's only 15 million Jews in the world today. There's 2.5 billion Christians. There's 2 billion Muslims. And the reason is Jews don't try to convert people. It's not a proselytizing religion. Christianity is, and so is Islam. So it's very easy to if you want to find a scapegoat for whatever the issue of the century or the decade is, well, there's not many Jews. Like two of the most, I believe, anti-Semitic, not anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic countries in Europe today is Norway and Ireland. Norway and Ireland both have a population of about 5.5 million people. In Ireland, there's only 1,500 Jews. In Norway, there's only 2,500 Jews. Most of the people from those countries never met a Jew. Most of them are living in the capitals. And yet they're among the most pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist, and I believe it bleeds over when you look at what they're doing day by day into anti-Semitism. So that's what I think the number. It's just like we're a real easy target. There's not many of us, so we never have been many of us. There's 7 million Jews in Israel, 6 million Jews in America, that's 13 million Jews. There's only another 2 million in the whole rest of the world. So I think that, and over the centuries, it's always been the same. When the British kicked the Jews out in 1492 from England, there was only 3,000 Jews in the entire country. It's an easy target. And so I think what we feel today is that Israel needs to be supported because it means we're not such an easy target after all. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Martin. We're going to begin here with some that came in early. Our friend Catherine Marengi wrote, I'm so tired of hearing people say it's not anti-Semitism to criticize Netanyahu, as if that immunized them to say anything hateful about Israel. It's never followed by an actual criticism of Netanyahu, but instead you hear the endless false charges of genocide, apartheid, white colonialism. Is there any way to get through to those motivated by a deep and visceral hatred toward Israel?
Sadly, I forgot my hearing aid. So that sounds like quite a complicated question.
Long question.
Okay, I'm not sure that I'm answering this exactly as it is, but bottom line, of course it's okay to criticize Israel. We criticize it. I criticize Israel. But the government changes, the government has different policies, and right now the policies are atrocious vis-a-vis the Palestinians in Gaza and what we're seeing. I don't see any defense for it. The defense is always, well, they started it and they can finish it anytime they release the hostages, etc. Bottom line, it's okay to criticize Israel. I think it's important to criticize Israel. Same as it's important to criticize President Trump if you don't agree with him. If you agree with him, support him. Speak freely. The question is, does that become anti-Semitic? That's the question that I have. And in many places it does, and in many places it doesn't. It's certainly not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. Otherwise, you wouldn't find half of Israel criticizing its own government. Did that answer the question? I'm not even sure.
Thank you so much. The second question came from our friend Marjorie Burren, who asks, how do we get people who are not anti-Semitic to disapprove of some of Israel's acts of aggression without being against Israel's existence and that of Jews worldwide?
Isn't that basically the same question? Oh, well, no, I think that is the same. I don't know if it's the same question, but it's the same answer. It's really all I got. which is, of course, it's okay to criticize Israel. It's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. What is anti-Semitic is when you take that criticism and apply it to Jews everywhere, and that is really, really wrong. I mean, there was for instance, after 9/11, there was a little outburst of hatred against Muslims in America, but it very quickly died out. Same kind of thing here. It's not dying out at all. It's growing. It's because over the centuries, whatever was the problem of the day, there was a scapegoat, and it was almost always the Jews. In the Great Plague in Europe, it was blamed on the Jews. Why? Because not many Jews were dying. Why weren't they dying? Because of their religious commitments, they washed their hands a lot. Same with the Muslims. They washed their hands 5 times a day before praying. But people didn't blame the Muslims for the Black Plague. They blamed the Jews. Why? I think it goes back to my reason. There's too many Muslims to blame. They'll fight back. Easy to blame the Jews. They got, and there's every century, almost every few decades, there's some problem in the world, and the Jews get it on the neck. And that's what's happening today with Israel. The difference is they deserve it. Israel deserves it today. In terms of what's happening in Gaza, you can say it because of Hamas. Doesn't matter. The images we're seeing are so terrible that you have to sympathize with those people. The defense would be, oh well, yeah, but half it's propaganda. It's not real. It's real enough to persuade the world, and so therefore we have to deal with that. That's a reality.
Thank you so much. Our Zoom audience has a question. This one comes from I can't tell you for sure. Is it Tom? It's Mark. Mark Hager, who is one of our Rotarians who is in absentia today. A question for the speaker. What parallels does he see between the story of safety between Jews and gay people? So much of this sense of relative safety began to emerge in the 1970s.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Okay, let me try it again. A question for the speaker. What parallels does he see between the story of safety between Jews and gay people? So much of this sense of relative safety began to emerge in the 1970s.
I guess in one sense, both under attack in America anyway, given what's happening with the government. But the interesting thing is that one of the safest places in the world for gay people is Israel. There are all kinds of terrible stories which we know personally of Palestinian gay people trying to come into Israel to escape death because they're gay. So I think that there's a kind of a parallel. I wouldn't take it too far. But under threat, sure. But there are lots of people under threat in the world today. Gay people, Jews, I don't want to go into all those things. Many countries, many minorities are under threat, and it's our duty to help all of the minorities.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from our audience. Is it commonly known that there are fewer Jews in the world than people in New Jersey?
Is that right? How many people live in New Jersey? I don't know. But certainly in terms of the size of Israel, it's about the same size as New Jersey. Yeah. I think the numbers of Jews is like, given the contribution that Jews make to the world in terms of everything, science, literature, everything, AI, I mean, the telephones, it's amazing. So you think that Israel would have at least 3 billion people, but it doesn't. There are so many Israeli tourists that go to Thailand. There was a famous story in Thailand. People all thought Israel must be the biggest country in Europe, given how many young men after the army and women were going on a holiday to Thailand. I think that Jews have a much greater imprint than they do in terms of rather than their real numbers. That's for sure.
Thank you, Martin. The next question is from our audience here. If you had a magic wand, what concrete, tangible changes would you employ to bring peace and justice to Palestine?
That's a great question. Well, I do have the answer, amazingly, and I think the answer comes from what I believe, and I was told this by a very wonderful woman in Israel. I don't think that the dispute between in Israel and Palestine is between Jews and Arabs. It's always presented as Jews and Arabs. I think the real conflict is not between Jews and Arabs, but between people who are willing to compromise for peace and people who are not willing to compromise for peace. There are Jews and Arabs on both sides sign a peace agreement tomorrow if there was one, doesn't matter almost what it says. And there are other Jews and Arabs on both sides who will simply never compromise. They both want the land. So I think the real struggle is between those who are willing to compromise for peace and those who are not willing to compromise for peace. Those who are willing to compromise for peace have to pressure their own people. And that's not happening in the Arab world. It is in the Jewish world.
Thank you, Martin. The last question from our audience is, it seems that Palestinians have the ear of most liberals. How can Israelis get control of the story? And we do have one more question. Oh, maybe two.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think to have a good story, you need to have a good story. Israel does not have a good story at the moment. I think it's kind of a lost cause. As long as the images keep coming from Gaza, it's going to be impossible to change the minds of almost anybody who is in that group of progressive liberal, which, by the way, is a group I would have put myself in until this particular issue arose, because I see how unfair and inaccurate a lot of the criticism of Israel is. One of the problems is that people who are against Israel never recognize its virtues, and people who are for Israel never recognize its problems. And we need more reality in the world. We need more journalists like me out there telling the truth instead of all these social media people just grinding out prejudice and hatred. As long as that is the case, and as long as those images come out of Gaza, it's not going to change. Now, many of those images that come out of Gaza are dictated by Hamas. I know that myself. I've been there. I've been in Gaza at least 100 times over the years, at least. And Hamas totally controls the press in Gaza, totally controls them. They live in. You're either part of Hamas, you're intimidated by Hamas, or you get out of the business. That's journalism in Gaza today. So many of the stories that we see are real. Many of them are not real. How do you judge the truth? Our world is changing. AI means that you can't trust anything you see these days. On videos, what they call slop videos. You can't trust what you're seeing. And that's in the very early days of AI. In another few more years, you'll have no idea what the truth is. It's even more important that you have people like me, like the old guy that I used to be, going out and speaking to those people that I was speaking to. So but I don't think you'll change the minds of the progressive liberals, because they're too much influenced by images and their own political futures, frankly.
Thank you, Martin. The next question is, can you explain how Jews hear and understand the phrase, quote, from the river to the sea, how it is and how it is understood by non-Jews? Would you like for me to record?
Yeah, that's another really good question. It's a really important question. Do anti-Zionists, I'm going to use all the sort of cliches here, do anti-Zionists understand what that means? Or are they just simply nice people who want to help the underdog? I think most of them are these nice people who want to help the underdog. They've got no idea what the reality of the situation is. So they're the same kind of people. I used to walk barefoot in London to Aldermaston to ban the bomb with all the, in the 1950s, I guess it was, or 60s, They're the same kind of people. Most of them are the same kind of people. What they don't get is that from the river to the sea has a very specific meaning, which is Arabs in, Jews out. Jews can stay if they accept Arab rule. However, we know what Arab rule means. We saw that on October 7. And all the promises that Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the other jihadist organizations openly say, we will kill all the Jews. I mean, it's part of, it's not only a slogan. And by the way, when people say, oh, they don't mean that, it's anti-Israel. If I've been to Gaza 100 times, I've been to Palestinian demonstrations in Gaza and the West Bank 5,000 times. They never ever say kill the Israelis. They only say kill the Jews, Yehud. When the army is coming, Jesh in Arabic. Jesh is coming. The Jesh sometimes, but it's always Yehud, the Jews. This is not a political thing. This is a religious issue, and combined with a land issue, combined with a human rights issue. It's very complicated. But when it's reduced to a simplistic slogan, for instance, from the river to the sea, I don't think everybody who's in America or Canada or wherever understands exactly what they're saying, but Jews and Israelis especially interpret it very, very specifically. It has a very clear meaning. We will control that land and you guys will be out one way or the other. And again, October 7 was absolute proof for Israelis that this is what's going to happen. Why did they kill 1,200 people? I'll tell you exactly why they killed 1,200 people. Because they couldn't kill 10,000.
Thank you, Martin. The next question is, what do you think of Mandani and how anti-Semitism on the left affects the politics in the United States?
By the way, this is great for deaf people. This is really good.
And we have John Doherty in the audience who created our deaf school here.
I don't really want to get into American politics. I don't really know enough about it. I mean, this is obviously a guy who's got his heart in the right place. And I think he's probably victim to what I've just been talking about, the incomplete understanding. He's a politician. He knows what's going to get him elected in New York at this moment. He's being very careful about his phrasing recently so as not to put off too many Jews. But, you know, young, progressive, liberal, that's what I used to be. Given what I've seen in the last couple of years, I'm understanding that actually there's not much understanding in the progressive left, whatever that really is, of the situation in the Middle East. Very little understanding. He's part of that.
Thank you. Please help me. Beverly, just a moment. Let me bring the mic.
Thanks. Hello. Do you think if Netanyahu were voted out of office, the Israeli attitude would change toward Gaza and the Palestinians? Or how deeply does that attitude go?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because somebody wrote today, the divide in Israel, it's not a divide, it's just a gigantic chasm. And if he was voted out of Israel, out of office, he first of all, he may be returned to office, given the numbers in the polls. Secondly, if there was a more center-left government, your specific question, would attitudes change? I don't think they change, because right now there's a clear majority of Israelis who want the war to end, 75, 78%. There's a clear number who you know, the demonstrations in the streets show it all. They're not going to change their mind. What will change is that the influence of the extreme right in Israel would hopefully decline very quickly. And the promises, one reason Israel's in such a pariah status is because of what the government members are saying. You know, when you have government ministers, a minister of finance, for God's sake, saying our goal is to force the Palestinians out of Gaza and settle it with Jews, and then and at the same time we want to do the same thing in the West Bank. That's what the Minister of Finance is saying. You know, and he's backed up by most of the government. So his supporters aren't going to change their minds when they're not in office. They're going to fight to get back into office. But the actions of the Israeli government probably would change dramatically. You know, the leftist government would end the war immediately. I mean, the Israeli army has said for the last year, we've done everything we can do, pretty much. Get the hostages out, which is the most important thing for most Israelis. So presumably government policy would change, but I doubt attitudes would change very much.
Thank you. One quick question, Susan. Quick.
Could you say more about how the political left doesn't understand the situation? I'm not sure I understood that.
The political left in America,
Yeah.
or Canada, or
Yes.
how they don't understand the situation. Well, I think we pretty much answered that, but I think that I guess it becomes at a certain point, even though I was asked not to become too political. At a certain point, in terms of answering your question, you do have to ask, you know, whose fault is this? Where's the blame for what's happening? And so then it becomes a matter of how far back in history you go to determine blame. But for instance, 9/11, Muslim jihadists bombed the Trade Tower, killed 3,000 Americans, and America's response is what it was. How much time was spent by Americans at that time asking themselves the question, why did this happen? Are we to blame? What is it in our history that caused this? I would guess that question didn't last 10 minutes in America. Who asked themselves that question? Why did they do it? What did we do wrong? Where was the progressive left then? Excuse my language, fucking nowhere. The question is only when it comes to Israel, that is the question, isn't it? That's the question. What did Israel do to deserve this? That's how the conversation changed after October 8 or 9. Even on October 8, a very good friend of mine responded to the whole thing by saying, it's complicated. No one said that about 9/11. It's complicated. Did anyone say that? I don't think so. Israel, it's complicated. And now it's kind of lost, the discussion from the liberal left has lost sight of the obvious fact that October 6th, they were living kind of, everything was pretty quiet. Not great, but pretty quiet. October 7 happened. Hamas caused that. Hamas has always, and the Islamic Jihad, and other Islamic organizations in Palestine and the rest of the Middle East, have always said our goal is to destroy Israel. That's what we want to do. One way or other, we're going to destroy that country in time. And that is not lost on Israel and its supporters. Hamas caused this. You may say, well, they had good reason to. I'm not going to get into that. But you don't really have a good reason. It's not complicated when you murder 1,200 people, many of them in their beds, or at a music festival, or you rape the women and all the other horrific stuff that happened. There's nothing complicated about that. Hamas began this war. Netanyahu today always says, Hamas could end the war tomorrow, lay down the weapons, skip out the hostages, the war will be over tomorrow. Well, actually, you say the same thing about Israel. Stop fighting, the war's over tomorrow. The cliche was always, I think I'll end on this, the cliche was always, if the Palestinians lay down their weapons, there'll be peace. If the Israelis lay down their weapons, there'll be a massacre. That's what Israelis believe. October 7 proved it was true.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.